The blue-green planet of Elysia hung in space like a perfect jewel. Its oceans sparkled, its forests were lush, and its fields stretched endlessly under golden sunshine. For thousands of years, it had been the crown jewel of the Galactic Council, a meeting place where hundreds of species came together in peace. Captain Tom Reed stood on the bridge of the Terran Envoy and watched the beautiful planet grow larger on the view screen. His ship was the first human vessel ever invited to Elysia. After 50 years of trying to join the Galactic Council, humans had finally been granted probationary status. "It's beautiful," said Lieutenant Kelly, Reed's second in command. "Hard to believe a place can be so perfect." Reed nodded. Class 0 Deathworld, or rather, the opposite of a death world. No dangerous animals, no bad weather, no natural disasters. Just paradise. "Makes Earth look pretty rough in comparison," Kelly said with a small laugh. Reed smiled. "Well, we come from a Class 5. The aliens think we're basically space orcs." The communication panel beeped. A soft, musical voice filled the bridge. "Terran Envoy, this is Elysia Control. You are cleared for landing at the central port. High Custodian Valon welcomes you to paradise." Reed took a deep breath. This mission was too important to mess up. Humanity's future in galactic society depended on making a good impression. The landing went smoothly. When the airlock doors opened, Reed led his team out into Elysia's perfect weather. The air smelled sweet, like flowers and fresh fruit. The sky was the perfect shade of blue. Even the gravity felt just right. Not too heavy, not too light. Waiting for them was a delegation of aliens. At the front stood a tall, slender being with pale blue skin and large, kind eyes. This was Valon, the High Custodian of Elysia and a member of the Lumari species. "Captain Reed," Valon said, his voice musical, "welcome to Elysia, the safest world in the galaxy. We are honored to host humans for the first time." Reed bowed slightly. "The honor is ours, High Custodian. We thank you for this opportunity." Valon gestured to the other aliens standing behind him. "These are representatives from 12 other Council species who maintain permanent missions on Elysia." Reed noticed how some of the aliens kept their distance. A few even looked nervous. He was used to this reaction. Humans had a reputation throughout the galaxy. "We have prepared a site for your outpost," Valon continued. "It is modest, but we hope it will serve your needs during your stay." Ambassador Jack stepped forward. He was Earth's official representative, a tall man with gray hair and a serious face. "We're grateful for your hospitality. We've brought scientists, diplomats, and a small security team, as discussed." At the mention of security, several aliens exchanged glances. One whispered to another. Valon's smile didn't waver. "Security is rarely needed on Elysia, Ambassador. Nothing here will harm you." "Old habits," Jack said with a friendly shrug. "We come from a world where everything wants to eat you." The joke fell flat. No one laughed. Dr. Morgan, the expedition's lead scientist, broke the awkward silence. "I'm especially interested in studying your ecosystem. A world with no predator-prey relationships is extraordinary." This seemed to please Valon. "Yes, our world exists in perfect harmony. The Lumari have been the caretakers of Elysia for 10,000 years. We ensure the balance is never disturbed." Reed looked around at the perfect landscape, the peaceful aliens, and the absolute lack of anything dangerous. It was beautiful, but something about it made him uneasy. Humans weren't used to places without threats. Paradise made them suspicious. "Come," said Valon, gesturing toward a path lined with flowers that never stung and trees that never dropped branches. "Let me show you where you'll be staying." As the human delegation followed the aliens, none of them realized they had already changed Elysia forever simply by arriving. Paradise had never met creatures evolved to survive hell before. And Paradise wasn't ready. The welcome dinner for the human delegation was held in a large open hall with no walls. Tables made of polished wood held colorful fruits and strange foods. Soft music played from nowhere. Small flying creatures, like a mix between birds and butterflies, moved freely through the space, landing occasionally to eat crumbs. Ambassador Jack looked around nervously. No walls, no roof. Velon smiled. Why would we need them? The temperature is always perfect. There are no dangerous storms, no harmful insects. Dr. Morgan was already making notes on her tablet. Fascinating. Your entire civilization has developed without the concept of shelter as protection. Shelter as art, as comfort, yes, Valon said. But protection. From what? Lieutenant Tanner, the head of security, stood stiffly nearby. His eyes constantly scanned the area, a habit from years of military training on Earth. Captain, he said quietly to Reed, this setup has zero defensive capabilities. Reed nodded. I know. Try to relax. We're guests here. Across the gathering, aliens from a dozen worlds mingled and talked. Many stole curious glances at the humans. Some whispered to each other. A small round alien with purple skin approached Dr. Morgan. I am Professor Lumi of the Science Council, he said. Is it true that on Earth, tiny invisible things can make you sick just by breathing them? Bacteria and viruses. Yes, Morgan answered. We have immune systems to fight them. And animals with poison teeth. Venomous snakes, yes. And water that falls from the sky so hard it can hurt you. Hailstorms, not that common, but yes. Professor Lumi shuddered. And you survived such things to become space travelers. Remarkable. Morgan smiled. Earth made us tough. Meanwhile, Ambassador Jack was having a different conversation with members of the Galactic Council. He looked at the building plans for the human outpost. These structures seem very open, Jack said, trying to be diplomatic. Of course, said a tall, thin alien named Grell. They match all standard designs on Elysia. Jack pointed to several areas on the plans. We'll need to modify these sections. Add some walls here. Maybe a security perimeter. The aliens looked confused. A perimeter? For what purpose? Grell asked. Standard human protocols, Jack explained. We need to secure our area. Secure it from what? Another alien asked. There is nothing dangerous on Elysia. Jack struggled to explain. It's not about Elysia. It's about us. Humans feel safer with boundaries. The aliens exchanged concerned looks. One whispered, Class 5 mentality. On the other side of the gathering, Captain Reed watched a strange scene. A small Lumeri child was playing with what looked like a local pet, a furry six-legged creature. The animal was gentle, letting the child pull its fur without complaint. Then the animal noticed Reed. It stared at him, nose twitching. Suddenly, it backed away from the child and made a low sound Reed had never heard before. The Lumeri child looked confused. Fluff never does that. Reed didn't move. I'm probably just unfamiliar. But around the gathering, Reed noticed other animals behaving strangely. The bird butterflies no longer flew near the humans. Some local animals had gathered at the edge of the forest, watching. Dr. Morgan appeared at Reed's side. Captain, I'm noticing something odd. The local wildlife is showing signs of caution around us. Is that significant? On a world with no predators, Morgan raised her eyebrows. It's impossible. These creatures haven't faced danger in thousands, maybe millions of years. They shouldn't know how to be afraid. But they are, Reed said, watching the animals at the forest edge. Yes, Morgan said quietly. Somehow, they sense we're different. They know we come from a world where everything learned to kill or be killed. Reed frowned. So what are you saying? I'm saying, Morgan whispered, that paradise is already changing, just because we're here. And I don't think our hosts are going to like it. In the perfect evening light of Elysia, the first small cracks in paradise had begun to show. 1 week after arriving on Elysia, the humans had made significant changes to their outpost. Despite protests from their Lumeri hosts, they had built a fence around their compound. They had installed filters on the water supply. They had even set up weather monitoring equipment. High Custodian Valon visited the human outpost with a troubled expression. Captain Reed met him at the new gate. "Captain Reed," Valon said, looking at the fence, "this barrier sends a concerning message to the Council." Reed opened the gate to let him in. "It's just basic safety, Custodian." "Safety from what?" Valon asked for what felt like the 100th time. "Elysia has no dangers." As they walked through the compound, Valon noticed more changes. Humans were testing soil samples. Others were examining local plants with scanners. Lieutenant Tanner was teaching a group of humans something that looked like fighting moves. "What is that?" Valon asked, pointing to Tanner's group. "Physical training," Reed explained. "Standard procedure." "It looks like preparation for combat," Valon said. "There is no combat on Elysia." Before Reed could answer, a commotion broke out near the edge of the compound. A small human child had wandered outside the fence and was returning with something following her. "Lisa," a woman called out. "Come back inside quickly." The child, maybe 5 years old, ran back to the gate. Behind her, a group of 6-legged creatures, the same kind Reed had seen at the welcome dinner, were following curiously. "They like me," Lisa said as her mother pulled her inside. "They followed me all the way from the big trees." Lieutenant Tanner closed the gate, and the creatures stopped, watching through the fence with unusual focus. "They've never done that before," Valon said, looking confused. "Our animals don't follow people." Dr. Morgan approached, tablet in hand. "They're learning," she said. "These creatures have strong pattern recognition abilities. They've noticed that human children drop food." "How do you know this?" Valon asked. "I've been studying them," Morgan said. "They're showing adaptive behaviors we wouldn't expect on a Class 0 world." Later that day, Reed, Morgan, and Ambassador Jack met in the command center. Another addition the Lumeri had objected to. "We've been here just 1 week," Jack said, "and our hosts are already unhappy with us." Morgan pulled up images on the main screen. "It's not just the fence and security measures. Look at these readings." The screen showed data about local plants and animals. "The ecosystem is responding to our presence in ways I can't explain," she continued. "Species that have been docile for thousands of years are developing new behaviors." "Like what?" Reed asked. "The 6-legged followers are the most obvious example, but some plants near our compound have shown early signs of developing thorns. A few flying species have changed their flight patterns to avoid us." Jack frowned. "Are you saying we're causing evolution to happen in a week?" "That's impossible." "It should be," Morgan agreed. "Unless." "Unless what?" Reed asked. "Unless the adaptability was always there, just waiting for a trigger. Like immune systems that only activate when they encounter a threat." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lieutenant Tanner entered with a weather report. "Sir, we're detecting a storm system developing over the eastern forest." "A storm?" Jack looked surprised. "The Lumeri said they don't have bad weather here." Tanner showed them the radar. "It's small but building strength. High winds, possibly heavy rain in about 6 hours." Reed turned to Morgan. "Could this be related to our presence too?" "I doubt it," Morgan said. "Weather systems are too complex to change that quickly. But it does make me wonder what else our hosts are wrong about." When Reed informed Valon about the approaching storm, the High Custodian laughed. "Our weather is perfectly balanced," Valon said. "Your instruments must be malfunctioning." Reed showed him the radar data. "We're preparing anyway. You might want to warn your people." "This is unnecessary," Valon insisted. "In 10,000 years of records, Elysia has never had a dangerous storm." As Valon left, still smiling, Reed watched dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The perfect world was showing its first flaw. He wondered how many more would appear. Because humans didn't just survive dangers. Sometimes, just by being what they were, they revealed the dangers that had been hidden all along. The storm had come and gone. It wasn't severe by Earth standards. Just some heavy rain and wind. But it had shocked the Lumari. Trees had fallen. Streams had overflowed. Nothing serious, but on a world where even minor problems never happened, it felt like disaster. Dr. Morgan stood in a clearing near the human compound, surrounded by fallen branches. Valon and Professor Lumi walked with her, looking troubled. "This has never happened," Valon said again, touching a broken tree limb. "Never." Morgan knelt to examine a small plant. Its leaves had been bent by the wind, but they were already straightening. "Your ecosystem recovers quickly," she noted. "That's not the point," Valon said. "The storm should not have happened at all." Morgan stood up. "I have a theory about that, and about the changes we've been seeing in the wildlife." She led them to her lab in the human compound. On screens around the room, data and images showed local plants and animals. "Look at these readings," she said, pointing to one display. "What are we seeing?" Professor Lumi asked. "Genetic adaptability," Morgan explained. "Every living thing here has surprising genetic flexibility. But it's been dormant until now." Valon looked confused. "I don't understand." "Your world evolved without serious threats," Morgan said. "No major predators, no harsh weather, no competition for resources. So life here never needed to develop strong defenses or adaptive strategies. And now?" Lumi asked. "Now humans are here," Morgan said simply. "We bring the mindset of a Class 5 Deathworld with us. We're always looking for threats, always preparing for the worst. The life forms here sense that, and they're responding." Outside, Lieutenant Tanner was demonstrating earth-fighting techniques to a few curious junior Lumari officials. They watched with wide eyes as he showed them how to block a punch. "But why would anyone punch another person?" asked one young Lumari. "On most worlds, there's conflict," Tanner explained patiently. "Sometimes you need to defend yourself." "Not on Elysia," the Lumari said proudly. Tanner nodded. "Lucky you," he said, but his tone suggested he thought otherwise. Captain Reed watched from a distance. Ambassador Jack joined him. "The Council is concerned," Jack said quietly. 3 other species have already left their outposts here." "Because of a little storm?" Reed asked. "Because everything is changing," Jack replied. "The storm, the animals. Did you hear about the river?" Reed shook his head. "The river near the eastern forests changed course slightly after the storm. It's never done that before. Some council members are saying." Jack hesitated. "Saying what?" "That we're contaminating Elysia. That humans bring chaos wherever we go." Reed frowned. "That's ridiculous. We haven't done anything except exist here." "Maybe that's enough," Jack said. In the forest beyond the human compound, a group of the 6-legged creatures watched a small Lumari child picking flowers. In the past, they would have ignored him or approached peacefully. But they had been watching the humans. They had noticed how humans always stayed together, how they watched for danger, how they protected their young ones. The creatures had learned something new: caution. Slowly, they surrounded the Lumari child. Back in her lab, Dr. Morgan reached a breakthrough. "I know what's happening," she exclaimed. Valon and Professor Lumen looked up from the data they were studying. "Elysia wasn't always a Class 0 world," Morgan said excitedly. "Look at these genetic markers. All your life forms have dormant survival systems, systems they evolved millions of years ago, and then never needed." "What are you saying?" Valon asked. "I'm saying Elysia used to be dangerous," Morgan explained. "Then something changed. Maybe a natural event, maybe some ancient technological intervention. The planet became safe, perfect, but the life forms here never lost their ability to adapt to danger. They just never needed to use it. Until humans arrived," Lumi said, understanding now. "Yes," Morgan nodded. "We represent the first real survival pressure this ecosystem has faced in millions of years. We're triggering adaptations that were always possible, just dormant." A loud alarm interrupted them. Lieutenant Tanner's voice came over the communication system. Security team to the eastern forest edge. Emergency. Valon's communicator chimed. His face went pale as he listened to the message. "What is it?" Morgan asked. "A Lumere child," Valon whispered, "surrounded by forest creatures that won't let him leave. They've never been aggressive before." Morgan and Valon looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. Paradise was changing faster than anyone had expected. Lieutenant Tanner led a team of 4 security officers through the forest. Captain Reed and Valon followed close behind. They moved quickly but carefully. "How far?" Reed asked. "About half a mile ahead," Tanner replied. "My team spotted the child from our monitoring position." Valon looked shocked. "You've been watching our forest." "Standard security protocol," Tanner said without apology. "Good thing we were." They reached a small clearing where a young Lumari boy stood frozen in fear. Around him, a circle of the 6-legged creatures blocked his escape. They weren't attacking, just watching, moving whenever the child tried to leave. "Milo," Valon called out. "Stay calm." The boy looked up, tears in his eyes. "They won't let me go home." Tanner assessed the situation quickly. They're hunting as a pack, learning cooperation. He pulled out a small device from his belt. Sonic deterrent. Non-harmful but should scatter them. He activated the device. A high-pitched sound that humans could barely hear filled the air. The creatures tilted their heads, confused. Then, after a moment, they backed away and disappeared into the forest. The Lumari boy ran to Valon, who held him tightly. "They've never done that before," the boy sobbed. "They've always been friendly." Reed and Tanner exchanged looks. Both were thinking the same thing. On Earth, this would be just another Tuesday. The emergency council meeting was the largest gathering since the humans had arrived. Representatives from all alien species still on Elysia attended. The mood was tense. "This incident confirms our fears," said Grell, the tall, thin alien who had objected to the human security measures. "The humans have destabilized Elysia's perfect balance." Ambassador Jack stood to address the council. "We understand your concerns, but we introduced no foreign species, no pollutants, no technology that could cause these changes. Yet the changes coincide exactly with your arrival," another council member pointed out. Dr. Morgan stepped forward. "If I may explain the science." The council reluctantly agreed to hear her. Morgan displayed images on the large screen. These showed genetic sequences from various Elysian life forms. "Look at these markers." She highlighted sections. "These are dormant survival adaptations, defensive features that evolved naturally but haven't been needed for millennia." She changed the display to show the 6-legged creatures. "These animals have always had the ability to hunt cooperatively. They just never needed to before. Our presence, specifically our human caution and defensive posture, has triggered latent behaviors." "So you admit you are causing these changes?" Grell demanded. "Not directly," Morgan replied. "We're simply the first survival pressure this ecosystem has faced in a very long time." Valon stood. His usual serene expression was gone. "Regardless of the cause, Elysia is changing. The perfect balance we Lumere have maintained for 10,000 years is breaking down." He turned to the human delegation. "Ambassador Jack, Captain Reed, Dr. Morgan, the council requests that all humans leave Elysia immediately." Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. But before Jack could respond, an urgent message came through on everyone's communication devices. A large storm, much bigger than the previous one, was forming over the Western Ocean. It would reach the main Lumari settlement within hours. "This is impossible," Valon whispered, looking at the storm data. 2 major weather events in 1 month. Dr. Morgan studied the readings. "The atmospheric patterns are shifting faster than I predicted." She looked at Valon. "Your people don't have any storm procedures, do they?" Valon shook his head slowly. "We've never needed them." Reed stepped forward. Then let us help you prepare. This is something humans know how to handle. The council members looked at each other uncertainly. They didn't want the humans on Elysia anymore. But they also had no idea how to face a real storm. The paradise you knew is changing, Reed said quietly. The question is, will you adapt to it, or will you be as unprepared as the animals in your forest? The room fell silent as the perfect world of Elysia faced its first real choice in 10,000 years. The storm hit with a force that Elysia had not seen in 10,000 years. Rain poured down in sheets. Wind bent trees that had never needed to grow strong against such forces. Streams swelled into rivers. At the main Lumeri settlement, humans and aliens worked together to secure buildings that had never been designed to withstand bad weather. Captain Reed coordinated teams, while Lieutenant Tanner's security officers helped evacuate the lowest areas. Move these people to higher ground, Reed ordered, pointing to a map. The river will overflow its banks within an hour. How can you be sure? A Lumari asked. Reed gave him a grim smile. On Earth, we learn to read these signs, or we don't survive. Ambassador Jack worked with Valen to organize shelter for the evacuees. The Lumari were confused and frightened. They had never faced a real emergency before. Your people are remarkably calm, Valen noted, watching the human teams work efficiently. This is what we do, Jack said simply. Humans prepare for disasters, survive them, and rebuild. It's in our blood. Dr. Morgan had remained at the human compound with Professor Lumi, monitoring the storm and continuing her research. As rain lashed against the windows, she made a startling discovery. Professor, look at this, she said, pointing to her screen. I've been analyzing soil samples from all over Elysia. Lumi peered at the data. What am I seeing? Evidence of ancient technology, Morgan explained excitedly. Microscopic machines, billions of them. In the soil, the water, even the air. Machines. Lumi looked confused. What kind of machines? Weather control. Ecosystem management. Morgan brought up new images. They're failing now, breaking down after who knows how many thousands of years of operation. Lumi sat down heavily. Are you saying Elysia's perfect balance was artificial? Morgan nodded. I think an ancient civilization, maybe your ancestors, maybe someone even older, engineered this world to be perfect. They created a system to control the weather, prevent natural disasters, maybe even influence life forms to be non-aggressive. But why is it failing now? It might have been failing slowly for centuries, Morgan suggested. Or maybe human presence introduced variables the system wasn't designed to handle. Either way, the truth is. A loud crash interrupted them as something large fell against the building. The lights flickered. We need to share this with the others, Morgan said urgently. In the forest, the storm was creating new dangers. Trees fell. Animals that had never faced such conditions panicked and ran in all directions. A group of Lumeri children, separated from their evacuation group, huddled under a rock overhang. Suddenly, they saw dozens of eyes glowing in the darkness. The six-legged creatures had found them, far more than before. And this time, they weren't just watching. They were hunting. The leader of the pack stepped forward, revealing new sharp teeth that seemed to have developed in just days. It growled, a sound no Lumeri had ever heard from these once gentle creatures. Just as the pack was about to attack, Lieutenant Tanner and two security officers burst into the clearing. They carried light sticks that cast harsh beams through the rain. Get behind us, Tanner shouted to the children. The creatures hesitated, confused by the bright lights. Tanner used the moment to deploy a barrier of sonic deterrence. The circle of sound kept the animals at bay while they guided the children to safety. They were going to eat us, one child whispered, trembling. Why would they do that? Tanner didn't answer. How could he explain to a child from paradise that in the rest of the universe, eating or being eaten was the most natural thing of all? Back at the emergency center, Valen received reports of similar incidents across Elysia. plants developing poisons, animals forming packs. The perfect world was transforming into something very different, something more like Earth. When Dr. Morgan arrived with her discovery about the ancient technology, Valon listened with growing horror. "So our paradise was never real?" he asked when she finished. "It was real," Morgan said gently. "Just maintained. And now the maintenance system is breaking down." Reed looked from Valon to Morgan. "So what happens now?" "Now," Morgan said, "Alicia becomes what it was always meant to be. A normal, natural world with all the dangers and beauties that come with it." "A Deathworld," Valon whispered. No one disagreed. 2 days after the storm, the Galactic Council held its final emergency meeting on Alicia. Half the alien representatives had already left the planet. The rest were planning to leave soon. High Custodian Valon looked tired. The perfect world he had helped maintain for decades was gone. Alicia had been officially reclassified as a Class 1 world, still mostly safe, but with growing dangers. "The Council has voted," Grell announced. "Earth's probationary membership is revoked. Humans are too dangerous to join galactic society at this time." Ambassador Jack nodded, accepting the decision without argument. The human delegation would leave within 24 hours. Dr. Morgan stood to address the Council one last time. "Before we go, I'd like to share our final research." She displayed images of the microscopic machines she had discovered. These devices maintained Alicia's perfect balance for thousands of years. But they were always meant to be temporary. "What do you mean?" Valon asked. "I found the original programming," Morgan explained. "They were designed to gradually shut down over time, allowing natural processes to resume slowly. The system was already failing when we arrived. Our presence just accelerated what was always going to happen." Valon frowned. "Why would our ancestors create a paradise that wouldn't last?" "Because true paradise isn't a place without challenges," Morgan said gently. "It's a place where life can grow, adapt, and become stronger. Your ancestors understood that." The council members murmured among themselves. This was not what they wanted to hear. As the human delegation packed their belongings, a group of young Lumari approached the compound. They were led by Milo, the boy who had been surrounded by the six-legged creatures. "We want to learn," Milo told Captain Reed. "We want to know how to live in a world with dangers." Reed looked surprised. "What about your elders?" "The council. They want to leave," Milo said. "But this is our home. We need to adapt, like Dr. Morgan said." Reed invited them inside. Lieutenant Tanner showed them basic self-defense moves. Dr. Morgan taught them how to identify which plants were becoming poisonous. Other humans demonstrated how to build simple shelters against storms. The young Lumari learned quickly. They had never needed these skills before, but the ability to learn was strong in them. That evening, Valon visited the human compound one last time. He found Reed watching the sunset. "Your ship leaves tomorrow," Valon said. Reed nodded. "We'll be gone by noon." "Many of my people are leaving too," Valon admitted. "They can't accept that paradise is changing." "And you?" Reed asked. Valon looked out at the forest, where new growth was already replacing trees damaged by the storm. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Morgan said, about true paradise." He turned to Reed. "I'd like to request that some of your people stay, to teach us." Reed looked surprised. The council voted. "I'm asking unofficially," Valon said. "A small team, scientists, teachers, to help us adapt to our new world." Before Reed could answer, Ambassador Jack joined them. He had been listening. "I'll bring this request to Earth," Jack said. "But first, I'd like to address the full council one last time." The next morning, with the human ship ready for departure, Jack stood before the remaining council members. "You voted to exclude humans from the Galactic Council because we make worlds dangerous," he began. "But that's looking at it wrong." He gestured to the world around them. "Alicia was always going to change. That's the nature of life, of planets, of the universe itself. Nothing stays perfect forever. Jack looked at each alien representative. Humans don't make worlds dangerous. We make ourselves, and others, strong enough to survive danger. That's our gift to the galaxy. He nodded to Valen. Some Lumari understand this. They're staying to face Elysia's changes, and with your permission, a small human team will stay to help them. The council members looked uncertain, but no one objected. As most humans boarded their ship, Dr. Morgan, Lieutenant Tanner, and 3 others remained behind with Valen and the young Lumari. Together, they would build a new kind of paradise on Elysia. Not a world without dangers, but a world where people were strong enough to face them. And that, as humans had always known, was the only paradise worth having.